Stay tuned to learn more about Game Master storytelling.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Welcome to the show. My name is Matt, and I am your host. This is the podcast where we learn how to become better game masters and role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. All right, guys, I have an awesome interview coming right up. But first, if you could like, rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening to it or in your favorite pod player app or whatever those things are called, that would be awesome. Those things help the show out immensely, and I could really use your help with that. Also, if you would like to support the show financially, you can do so at patreon.com/dicegeeks. Plus, I have a wide array of Game Master and role-playing resource books that help you cut down Game Master prep time and have more fun at the table. You can find those at dicegeeks.com, amazon.com, or drivethrurpg.com. You can just search for Dice Geeks, all one word, and you should be able to find those if you Google it or if you search on one of those sites. Again, greatly appreciated if you would check out some of my resource books. Support of the podcast and selling the books really just ensure that I can continue interviewing awesome game designers, writers, filmmakers, historians. So if you like these interviews that I do each and every Wednesday, please consider supporting the show in some way, either by buying my books or supporting the show directly. And as always, that would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Now, here's today's interview. My guest today is the author of My Guide to RPG Storytelling, Aron Jolley-Meers. Aron, welcome to the show.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me.
How did you discover the amazing hobby of tabletop role-playing games?
That's kind of hard to say. I don't remember. I've been role-playing for just about as long as I can remember. So I think sometime in kindergarten.
Okay.
At the daycare where we got dropped off after school, the daycare lady's oldest son did role playing, and so he kind of got some of the kids in, and it was just kind of like telling stories, but we got to tell a part of the story too, and got to have a character in that story. So it probably wasn't until I was like 9 or 10 that I actually saw a role playing book and went, "Oh my God, this is like an actual thing. He wasn't just making this stuff up."
Well, that's interesting that you started so early. I played for the first time when I was 9. So what were you doing? Was he just making stuff up, or was he playing Dungeons and Dragons or something like that?
He was pulling, stuff from Dungeons and Dragons, ripping off the plots of movies that I didn't see until I got older.
There you go.
Making stuff up. So then I kind of started doing the same thing. Then I would, at school, at lunch, on the playground or recess, or on the bus on the way home, I would just get whoever I could interest in it and tell them stories and give them characters and let them, tell their part of the story until I actually got my hands on some books and started using rules and dice and paper.
Oh, that's awesome. So then did you get your hands on D&D?
Yeah, AD&D early on, Palladium's RPG. Kind of once it started, everything just kind of came tumbling in at once. Pretty much everything that was available in the 80s.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a similar experience as well. Just was introduced with, a basic Dungeons and Dragons, and then I was off to the races with Marvel superheroes, Star Frontiers, Fastest Star Trek.
Right. Yeah. People start bringing different books in, and you just ooh, a new one, and just try to take them all in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Definitely.
And then I think I was a later teen when I discovered Palladium. I think it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness first. And then the Heroes Unlimited.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Heroes Unlimited, especially second edition. I played that a lot. The Palladium games, their books were just so complete. Just like... just imagine a superhero. You flip open the book and you're like, "Oh, I can make that."
Yeah,
I mean, it's just incredible.
I think my first Palladium was the Robotech RPG.
Oh yeah,
because I'd seen the anime, so I was a fan of the TV show. And I'm like, "Oh wait, I can be a Veritech pilot." and got into it there. And then, of course, as soon as Vampire the Masquerade came out, all through high school, we were big White Wolf players.
Okay. Yeah, I played Robotech as well, or at least tried to. Me and it was like pretty much with Robotech, though. It was only like one other buddy of mine had seen the cartoon, had seen the show on, because I don't know. It was, I guess maybe they considered it like too violent or something, because it was on at like 6 a.m. on Sunday mornings or something in the market where we grew up. But it was like, I saw it. I don't know what you guys were doing, but I watched it. And so we tried playing that. So that was a lot of fun. But it's bringing back some memories with some of those games. So now, you kind of said that you started introducing some of your friends. So I guess, when you were young and then as a teenager, were you the driving force behind getting some of your friends to play tabletop RPGs?
Absolutely. Yeah. I fixated on it pretty young. Was doing it constantly with anybody who would sit still long enough. And even in high school, latching on to other nerds and role playing, like, some of them would go ahead and run games as well. But like, we only usually got in a couple of weeks, and then it seemed like they'd get bored, or they'd just get distracted by something new. A new book would come out. Oh man, we want to play that. And I was the only one who could run a whole campaign and stick through it. So I kind of would just grab anybody that I could to sit down and keep them there.
I know, especially in my experience when I was a teenager, and that it was like campaigns were mythical things. you would hear, whispers, at the game shop of somebody who was like, we played like 28 sessions of this same characters. And it was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I heard about people who had level 30 characters or had played the same character for 5 years or something. And I just look at them and go, how?
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. It was just like, because you just couldn't keep people's attention. We had all the time in the world, it almost seemed like, but you just couldn't keep people focused on something. Yeah, no, that's really neat. So, so you picked up the mantle of GM pretty quick, huh?
Yeah, and I was very interested in it. Always liked telling stories and creative writing and stuff like that. And so to kind of be able to do that and have people listen to those stories and be involved in them and be excited about them and surprised by things I sprang and stuff was kind of addicting, or at least habit forming.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. I think it is borderline addicting, actually.
There's a reward. I get a dopamine rush when I make everyone at the table laugh, or when I put the characters through the ringer and somebody cries over an NPC death or something like that. It's there's a rush.
Yeah, absolutely. I did find it happened more when I was a teenager, in that, although it's still every once in a while it'll kind of come up. Did you ever find that if you bought a new book, you were kind of expected to be the game master?
Yeah. Also, I got a lot of books for birthday presents. Somebody would go, "Here, run this." Yeah. And so they'd give me a book, and I'm like, it kind of feels like you're not getting me a present, like I'm getting you the present.
Yeah. I think it was like, that even happened. Well, I think it was about 8 years ago or so now. A friend of mine, it was my birthday. And obviously we've been adults for a very long time. He like shows up and hands me Pathfinder, and he's like, "Happy birthday." And I'm like, "What is this?" And he's like, "I want you to run this for me." And he's like, "But it's a present. Just take it." And he just gave me Pathfinder, like $100 worth of books. And I was just like, "Oh, okay. I guess so." And we,
at that point, I want to put out, wow, you're giving me a stack of books. Okay, I'll run something.
Yeah, absolutely. I was like, okay, fine. And so we ran, I ran a few sessions, but he got, I guess he got his enjoyment out of it. He hasn't complained. So
there you go. I get new books.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I just thought that was funny. That I actually remember a couple times, like maybe like, holding Spelljammer or something and going, if I buy it, I'll be expected to run it. So I can't really right now. And so I just put it back. Yeah. And then now I wish I had bought it.
Drive-through RPG.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's got to be there somewhere.
Yeah, it's got to be there somewhere. Absolutely. But no, that's just interesting. I always enjoy hearing people how they got started. So since you have been running games for a long time. I'm sure you've picked up some things. And of course, you have now written a book about running games. Why don't you just walk us through like how, what are you playing nowadays? And then how does that lead you into, writing a book about RPG storytelling?
So we're doing White Wolf still. And my gaming group, we're all old timers, so we're even still playing second edition. We're playing fifth edition D&D, conversely, and we've been playing a game called BESM, BESM, short for Big Eyes Small Mouth, and it's kind of geared towards recreating anime style games. And had just house ruled that so much, and we started looking at just how far our game was from the original books, the manuals. And so we went, you know what, let's just make our own game. We've obviously got rules that we like, that we've cribbed from everything we've run across. So my wife, Erica, and I started building our own game that we're calling Snake Eyes. And so we're building that out and trying to test it on our player group and stuff. But that actually came after writing the RPG guide. My guide to RPG storytelling came about because my gaming group, which is, waxed and waned over the years. There's a couple of core players and then folks who've come and gone. But one of them kind of said, you should write some of this stuff down because the games that you run, I've never played in a game like it. And I kept hearing that from more and more of the people I gamed with. So since Erica and I had written some novels, we thought, well, how hard could nonfiction be? Write about role-playing. It's harder. I definitely like spending my time in fiction, but I also like talking about role-playing. So I just tried to write like I was having a conversation on role-playing and just talk about what I do and the things that people have told me are different than they're used to. And I'm real big on laying out everything I've ever done wrong so that on the off chance somebody picks up my book and is interested in running a game, they can go, oh, wow, he really screwed that up. I won't do that. And their game will be better than mine was.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. That sounds really great. And I definitely want to dive into it. So, I don't know. I just always find it interesting, too, that most of the game masters I speak to have either written novels or intend to write one. And I guess that's just because we're storytellers or they're filmmakers, or something like that. I mean, they're always telling stories. So I just find that always fascinating as well.
And I think a writer, a filmmaker, a game master, they're all storytellers. Yeah. And in the book, that's the term that we use. My guide to RPG storytelling, because that's kind of the focus, as maybe because I first learned to role play without character sheets and dice. It was just a story to me. So that's very much sort of where I come from. And then the dice and more structured games have become the vehicle through which I tell my stories.
Yeah, interesting. And so why don't you did mention that you said that people tell you that your games are different than other games. In kind of what way?
Well, I think the big one is, like we talked about earlier, is I can finish a campaign. So I've got an attention span long enough to tell the whole story. And even there, talking to people who've had those characters who go all the way up to level 100 or whatever, or who've played the same character for 5 years, I try to build my games as stories. So they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then we say goodbye to the characters, wrap things up in a denouement or epilogue. And then we move on. We play a totally different game, totally different system sometimes. And we have a new story with new characters. That seemed pretty natural to me to have a story arc to my role-playing game campaigns. And I think a lot of it also comes from the people that I game with hadn't really seen that a lot before, because we're all old folks, and in earlier role playing, things were slanted much towards like the dungeon crawl sort of experience. And so having story beats and a plot arc was something that my friends hadn't really encountered before in role playing.
Yeah. So I take it then that you plan out your campaigns like in advance, or you plan out your sessions kind of in advance?
I do. Yeah. So I'm autistic, and that lends itself to a lot of hyper focus and obsession. And fortunately, I'm fixated on a nice, healthy hobby like role playing. But I can get overwhelmed by chaos very quickly. So I spend a lot of time planning my games out. Now, I didn't always do that, but the more I planned out, the less stress I experienced. So having a nice solid outline with different options prepared for and things like that kind of gave me a little safety net for myself. My players still pull all the most insane crap and surprise me all the time, but I always have my outline. So no matter where I end up chasing them as they lead the story, I've always got my next story hook or my next plot beat ready there in my outline. So that helps me manage the chaos and stress of running a game. Gives me some confidence and structure that my brain really needs.
That's interesting, because I am the author of a book called The No Prep Game Master.
Exactly.
And so I have learned to let go, and mainly for a lot of practical reasons, being that if I have a game night and I have 3 hours to game, I don't have any other time during the week to really think about the game unless I'm driving or taking a shower or something like that.
You can't exactly write a lot of notes during that.
Yes, exactly. And so, and while I say, I like the no prep approach, I'm not like anti-prep or anything like that. But I do find it interesting that people do prep. My problem, I'm not saying this is your problem, my problem when I would prep is then what I would do to my players is you have to go my way, right? I put them on the railroad, right? It was just all aboard. How do you eliminate doing something like that if you're planning out and have an outline and stuff like that?
So I kind of look at that railroading approach. That's the stick, and then there's the carrot. And so I try to make this story something that my players want to pursue. So I'm very involved with character creation and planting seeds in my players' backstories that then I can draw on to interest them in the plot, and making my villains very despicable people who are doing awful things that the players want to put a stop to. So rather than pushing them to do a certain thing, I'll kind of say, well, here's this thing going on here, and I'll give them a reason to care about it and let them take it from there. And they kind of lead the way. The metaphor that I use is, rather than a railroad, it's like an 8-lane freeway. So it's going to a certain place, in my plot arc, but there are a lot of lanes to choose from, and there's maybe scenic rest stops to take a break at, and you can come off the freeway and go on a side quest for surface streets for a little while and then get back on. But in the end, my group ends up where the story is heading. They just kind of get to choose their route to it.
No, that's interesting. And I like that metaphor too. I like that. So what are some other things, like, you called your book My Guide to RPG Storytelling. So what are some things that you talk about in the book that help game masters tell stories?
I talk a little bit about character motivation and using those seeds and character backgrounds and making them a part of the plot. Mpc motivations. Characters are kind of my strong suit. I'm not very number crunchy, so sometimes I'll lean on some of my players for the sort of technical parts. My wife Erica is much better at mysteries, so if I have an investigation going on, she helps me come up with that. But I make games that lean very strongly on character and on emotional drive. So I talk a lot about that and what it does to the game and how it lends it some pathos, so that it's not just kind of swinging a sword or shooting monsters or anything like that, which there always is. Mm-hmm. But how to turn that into a story where all of those scenes have meaning and unwrap the next layer of the plot.
Interesting. So let's just say, there's a game master out there and they've been doing a lot of hacking and slashing, but they're feeling like their scenes are a little empty and lack meaning. How do you add them? How do you add that layer of meaning into some of those?
Well, since this isn't going to be out for a couple of weeks from the time of our recording, we'll talk a little bit about the game I'm running right now, which is about a previous group of heroes that defeated a demon lord.
Is this D&D?
Were celebrated. No, this is in White Wolf.
Okay.
But it could be in D&D. I mean, the story you could use in any setting, because the concept is very much about these heroes and the choices they made. They defeated this demon lord. They were lauded as heroes. They've all become very highly ranked, highly respected people across the game setting. And now the player characters come into this with these role models, these idols who are celebrated, and get sent in the first chapter as sort of ambassadors to carry gifts from one of these heroes at their court to her old friends. And as they have done so, they've run into these demonic plots that are going on. And what they're almost ready to discover, and we'll probably discover by the time this podcast gets published, is that the heroes didn't defeat the demon lord. They couldn't, they weren't strong enough. They bargained with it instead. They basically agreed to release the demon lord into the world in return for 50 years of peace, during which, some of them just sort of hoped to avoid the fight. Some of the old heroes hoped to spend that time in preparation. And now that time is up. And it's up to the player characters to kind of fix the problem that the previous generation of heroes left for them. So there's fighting demons and evil spirits and things like that. But it's about the mistake these old heroes made and their weaknesses and where they compromised and how they're trying to either cover up their mistake, interfering with the player characters, or trying to redeem themselves, helping them on the sly. And that's kind of why I have to plot that out. I have to think, okay, and that's, maybe it's not so much that I plotted it out as that was my starting point for the story, was the failed heroes trying to correct their old mistake. And then it all comes from there.
Yeah, I can see that. Then it does give kind of an extra layer of meaning to the world there. So the players kind of care about these heroes. They found out that one of them is a traitor. They don't know that all of the heroes bargained here, and they just loathe the guy. And that's what I want. I want a very emotional reaction. Like when we read a good book or watch a movie that we love, I cried at the end of Terminator 2 when he's sinking down into the ironworks and stuff. And I've gotten just pumped full of adrenaline reading The Expanse. And I want that for my characters too. I want to give them that emotional surge. And if you can do that with a book or a movie, why not with a role-playing game? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, because we're telling stories, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just they get to tell the story too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're the protagonists, basically, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is interesting too. Now, I guess that's something else that I always think of. I think of sometimes, obviously when I do conventions and stuff now that I've started, kind of going around, people will ask, well, or I've done even podcasts with how game masters can tell better stories. That's kind of overstating it a bit because the players are storytellers at the table as well, right?
Absolutely. It's collaborative. And I see my job as presenting them with a situation and a problem to solve. And then I can try to guess how they might solve it and prepare. But in the end, I'm as surprised by what they do as they're surprised by what I do.
Yeah.
And what comes out when what they bring to the table and what I put on the table, it's an alchemy that produces something that you don't get writing novels or making movies even.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because the hero of your story is, independent, right, from the person who is creating conflicts and things for them to overcome. So it's
right. It's like when you see one of those clickbait lists of like 10 times actors improvised and it got kept in the movie, except that it's the whole thing. It's here's your characters and your roles, and you get to pick them, and then you get to make everything up.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, I guess the famous example is Indiana Jones shooting the guy with the big sword or whatever.
Exactly. I might have this big fight scene planned out and somebody just says, well, he's standing on the trap door, right? Can I just hit the button? Oh, well, there's my fight scene, but that's awesome. Let's do this.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that one. No, absolutely. And I think there's, I don't know, like you said, there's an alchemy there. There's some kind of magic when you get a number of people together kind of telling the story, and ideas come up, right? Because, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Like I've gamed with some people now for, 25 years, in my group, and I just never know what's going to come out of their mouth. Right. Like, I'll think, oh, hey, here's a new set, kind of situation for a campaign, and we're going to play this, and they'll make a character. I'm like, okay, that's super creative. Awesome. Like always, we'll sit down at the session and it's just like, where are you getting this stuff? Like, you're just coming up with just like crazy stuff, amazing stuff. It's like, where does it come from?
Especially those people you've been playing with for decades. You're like, man, we've been doing this for 20 years and how did I not see that coming?
Yeah.
But they can always surprise you.
Absolutely. And I always, find it, a little sad when, you'll hear some horror stories of like a game master who will shut down a player or something when they have something really good that like comes out because, and for, fair notice, right. I've done that, right. I've made every mistake when I've been a game master. Like there's just no way around that. But when a player gives you something like that's just, and you just know it's cool. Like you're just like, that would be cool in a movie or a book. You just have to like, just go with that. Right. Like you just have to like, use that in some way, or, because otherwise you're just, I don't know, you're just killing the magic. Right.
Yeah. I had this NPC once and I forget even they were a villain and I forget what their deal was originally, because after meeting him and role playing with him for like 10 minutes, they were convinced this NPC was a vampire. And I just kind of went, oh, that would be cooler than what I was doing. Mm-hmm. So then he just was a vampire and they were just right. And I just changed what the villain's deal was and went with their idea because it turned out to be cooler. And they were all high-fiving each other going, I knew it. And I'm like, well, yeah, sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can't tell you how many times that has happened. Or, I'll mention some offhand remark and be like, oh, this person's wearing a green cloak. And then I'm describing the next session or the next scene or something. And I'll say, oh, you see a person with a green cloak walking by. And my players would be like, there's some kind of group wearing green cloaks. And I was just like, oh man, I just forgot I had mentioned green cloak before and just described the same person, a different person wearing a green cloak. Well, now there's a secret order of people who wear green cloaks, and I don't know what the green cloaks are going to do yet, but they're going to be there because that's cooler. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. What are some other things that you dive into in the book? I'm sure you have a lot of advice in there.
I think one of the big things that we talk about a lot and that have become a major facet of our role playing are what we've started calling crisis scenes. And they're non-combat action scenes might be the most succinct way to put it. My buddy was running this game. We were sky pirates, and our airship got damaged in a storm. And the player playing our engineer had to climb out onto the wing and fix the prop engine sticking out of the side of our Zeppelin. And it wasn't just like he makes his engineering roll, fixes the engine, and we go on our way. There was, rain, and he had to dangle from a rope and do all these other things. And I'm like, well, wow, that was like in a movie, in Fury Road or something, when they're crawling under the war rig trying to fix the engine while they're being chased by all the war bands. And I was just like, well, wow, why don't we do that all the time? There's so many things that we see in movies and read in books that aren't just a shootout or a sword fight that are exciting and they get us on the edge of our seat. So I started doing that with anything like that. I had a character deliver a baby as a crisis, and medical problems popped up in the middle of it. You had to save the baby, then try to save the mother and things like that. I did a poker tournament with bluffing and blackmail and things like that. So I mean, just any scene I can get that would get me excited if I were watching it in a movie. I try to make a crisis out of it rather than a single roll or just, you're climbing cliffs, so I need you to make an athletics check. Okay, make another one. Okay, 5 successes, you're at the top of the mountain. Mm-hmm. All the players did was roll athletics 5 times. Mm-hmm. Which could be more exciting if a piece of rock falls from above and they have to dodge it instead of just make a climbing roll, or if an NPC slips and they have to catch them. Just try to throw in some complication to any sort of a normal skill challenge to make it more difficult, more exciting, to give them a chance to do something creative to deal with whatever monkey wrench I've thrown into a normal activity.
One of the areas where certainly I had failed for a long time is that I would just forget, or I was thinking about kind of so many other things. I would forget to add in kind of environmental details or, kind of, like you said, just like flavor it with, it's raining. It's not that it's, this climb is kind of tricky. Okay, well, why don't we tell them why it's tricky, right? It's tricky because it started to rain. The rocks are slippery, whatever it is, and kind of create a scene around that instead of, just saying, it's tricky, difficulty's 15, roll.
Yeah. But like you said in the no prep guide, the person running the game has so much to do. Yeah. You've got to wear a million hats. Mm-hmm. So it can be real easy to let those things slip. Yeah. And, I've done the same thing, kicking myself for missing an opportunity to make something a little bit more exciting or something like that. But you learn. I'm better at it than I used to be. I prepare in my game prep some crises for things that I think might happen. And sometimes I've got to pull one out of my butt because they do something I've got nothing prepared for, but I can say, okay, I'm going to let them do their thing. And I can think of like 3 ways for this to go wrong. Mm-hmm. So let me just throw out these little things to trip them and watch them jump over them or go around them or do something clever.
Yeah. And, we were talking about complications. That's one thing that I think is like one of the primary jobs of the game master, right? Because, an example I gave just recently at convention, the idea is that if, James Bond is sitting on the beach in Cabo San Lucas with, a lady friend, and he gets a call from M, and M tells him, okay, there's a madman in Switzerland who's going to poison the world's water supply, and we know where his base is, but we can't get into it. Why doesn't he just hang up and call like the Swiss SWAT team and have them go in? Because, if you know where the base is, just send them in. Swiss doesn't want this guy here. The Swiss don't want this guy here. But the problem is there's no complications in that, right? So I think too, like we mentioned, the player characters, right? They're the protagonist. Well, the protagonist wants to get to their goal as easily as they can. If they can just walk across the room or make a phone call or do something, that's what they're going to do. But as the game master, we've got to throw complications at them. So they have to keep trying to overcome those complications, at each step when they're, to continue Indiana Jones, right? Marion is kidnapped. She's put into a basket. Well, Indiana Jones runs around the corner. Everybody's carrying the same basket, right? Yes. There's 40 people carrying the same basket. And you're just like, oh no, which one's she in? Right? Like complications. I don't know if that's how you feel as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like breaking into places. That's something parties do just all the time. So I kind of figure anytime they break in somewhere, A, they might just kind of kick in the front door and fight. So I'll prepare combat. B, they might try to sneak in. So I might come up with, how many doors does this place have? What the security is? Sure, there might be some stealth checks in there, but maybe there's also going to be a check when they're walking through the corridors and they hear footsteps of patrolling guards and they have to find a hiding place to jump into real quick. So there might be investigation rather than stealth so that they can jump into a broom closet or into a grate. If they go in disguise, maybe they'll have a scullion walk in while they're changing into guard uniforms, and now they have to convince the scullion to stay quiet. Just no matter what they do, what angle they come at it, and I try to prepare for each of those approaches with just some things so hurdles to make them jump.
Yeah. Yeah. And, since, like I said, I take the no prep kind of approach, what I try to do is just keep, in the back of my mind, kind of a little library of complications that anytime I'm reading a book or watching a TV show or watching a movie, anytime I'm hearing a story, I'm just, understanding some of those things. What could complicate somebody breaking into, a building of some kind? If it's a castle, what kind of complications are there? Oh, well, I've seen this in a movie. I've seen this in a book. I've read, about this. I heard this one time. And these are just, those things just kind of go in my, in the back of my mind. Just so when, the player says, oh, I want to sneak aboard that ship that's moored in the harbor. Okay, well, I know there's going to be, the dock's going to be slippery because there's water around. The ship is moving back and forth because of waves. There's probably be guards on the ship if there's a valuable cargo on it, and just kind of down the line, just so how many, complications can I give the player to where it's actually, fun for them and challenging
and memorable.
Yeah. That it's challenging. That it's not just, okay, you're on the ship now. Oh, okay. Yeah. You find the gold. Okay. And you leave.
And it doesn't take like prep. It's just, if they're sneaking someplace and there's just going to be 5 stealth checks to get there, it's just looking for an excuse to shake it up and throw a different role in there. Maybe something wildly different, intelligence-based or social instead, just so that it's not rolling the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And adding a little bit more flavor than just saying, make a stealth check. You make a stealth check. Why? Because somebody could see you, right? And who are those people? And then maybe somebody decides, oh, well, yeah, man, I can't sneak past them. I'll just go talk to them.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, go talk to them.
Why not? Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I found is my players remember those scenes in much more detail and with more fondness than for most just straight up fights.
Yeah.
Role playing began as war games, and I like action heavy stories. I'm a martial artist. I love action movies. So it's always got that stuff in there. But just swinging a sword over and over again, or, you roll a natural 20 and like it's exciting at the time, but that's not what they're going to remember 5 years ago. Nobody really goes, man, remember the time I rolled that natural 20 against the ogre? They remember those crises, that time that they tried to sneak through an ogre camp because one character sat on someone else's shoulders and they covered themselves in fur and tried to, act like two people in an ogre suit and hilariously bluff their way through the ogre camp or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that they remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Or where they, I think, just remembering back a scene when we were playing a Star Wars game one time where the players pretended to be like a cleaning crew to get into a building, and one of them wanted to bring his blaster rifle, so they rolled it up in a carpet, right? Uh-huh. And you're just like, well, that's awesome. And so he's carrying like a roll of carpet or a rug over his shoulder, but there's a blaster rifle in there, and and so that's that brings up more memory than probably the 12 or 24 stormtroopers that we shot later on, like, which I can't even remember. I remember the cleaning crew deal, right?
Yeah, there was probably stormtroopers because it was a Star Wars game, but they have an awesome story about how they snuck their weapons in.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of thinking about that too. I think you can take a lot from, say screenwriting, especially from some movies like maybe like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, where you can't just have a wedding, right? You have to be sword fighting during the wedding, and then you can't just have a sword fight during a wedding. You have to be on a sinking ship. While you're doing that. And then you can't just be a sinking ship. It's being attacked by pirates, you just pile on in certain instances when you can do that. And it really, it takes things beyond, okay, well, we fought 5 pirates or 6 pirates tonight. It takes it to something, to another level, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've got, say like a surgical crisis. The ambassador's been shot and, the medic has got to, pull the bullet out and stop the bleeding and stuff. That's cool. But then you can put it in the back of a moving car with the assassin's still chasing the party and stuff like that. Yeah. Just pile it up, make it exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That absolutely right. Because they're, things rather, don't often happen very neatly, right? They tend to happen very neatly in bad movies or bad books, right? But they don't happen very neatly in things that we, that are very memorable. So yeah, like you said, the assassin is now chasing them through the streets, and your medical roles are complicated by the fact that the person who's driving is trying to evade gunfire, and then then there's construction on the road, right? So they have to turn. I mean, it's just always about adding those complications to it.
Right. And then the great thing is then the players add their own complications.
Yes.
Somebody decides that as they swerve around a motorcycle, they're going to leap out of the car, knock the person off, and steal the motorcycle so they can drop back behind their pursuers and engage them or something. They come up with something crazy and add their own layers to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can just kind of just keep building off of all of that. You just keep building and building and building until, you get a really great, climax.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. And is there, I guess maybe, are there any specific tips, like kind of practical things maybe that, somebody who's running a game tonight can just just kind of use at the table, some things maybe that you use to make sure you're kind of making exciting and making things, kind of making your stories powerful, that, if they're running a session today or tonight, that they can just kind of use those things.
Never let your players roll like the same thing more than twice, really. If they're going to roll the same thing a third time, find a reason that they've got to use a different skill or a different ability or something like that. It's going too smooth. at that point there. And not just a failure. Failure kind of roughens things up, but not necessarily in an interesting way. It's usually a frustrating way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, give them some challenge. And like anything that as a game master, I throw at my party, it's a challenge I want them to overcome. They're the heroes. It's their job to defeat the enemies I throw at them and overcome the challenges I give them. But give them something to overcome. So yeah, mix up your die rolls. If you've got something long that's just going on too much, I invest in my NPCs, the villains and the allies, and make them people who care about things, and make them people that the players can care about, whether they care about the villain because they hate them and stopping them isn't just to save the world, it's personal, or whether they care about an NPC ally that they adore and that they're someone you can maybe capture and know that your players will drop everything to run out and rescue them, or someone that you can kill off to give them an emotional speed bump. And I prefer that to defeating my player group in combat. If they have to run away from a fight, or if they get beat in a fight, that's much less interesting than if they win at a cost. They succeed, they're the heroes, they're supposed to overcome the challenges, but maybe they lose something. An NPC, a secondary goal, something like that, to where they have the victory in the fight, but then an emotional cost to it. And that's way bigger stakes than just, there's too many orcs, let's run away.
No, I think those are great. I know there are certain players who will just keep rolling that same skill over and over again if you let them.
Right.
So I think that's some good advice there. And I did really like the kind of the investing in your NPCs as well. You did bring up an interesting thing. I don't know if I've asked anybody outright. And especially coming from kind of back in the day, I was wondering how you handle character death, because back in the day, right? Like when I was a teenager, I was like, oh, your character's dead, make a new one while we all play. And nobody seemed to have a problem with that. And nowadays, I've met a couple people who seem to be like, what do you mean characters die? kind of thing. So how do you handle character death?
Yeah. I keep it pretty rare. Usually what I do is kind of offer them alternatives to death. Their character does something dangerous. They're swinging across the mouth of a volcano or something, and they fall, and their roll to catch the ledge fails, and someone else reaches for them and they fail, and they're in the lava now. Mm-hmm. If I can reasonably say, okay, yes, you survive, but you are scarred. And your character can take a complication, a flaw, a penalty, something, and kind of keep limping on. Sometimes it's even an emotional scar. But their character gets to continue the story, maybe with some kind of penalty or detrimental effect that their character now has to go on with. But they get to continue the story. I don't like the idea of somebody's background who just gets cut short before being explored. Their story ended before they get to see how it was going to turn out. I'd rather let them keep going, but put a price tag on that. Yes, you can keep your character, but not untouched, not unscathed. That being said, you know what? Sometimes just everybody fails the roles and there's nothing you can do. And I can't think of a graceful way for them to just, get a cool eye patch out of it instead of dying. Or if somebody wants to phase out their character, then, then it's time.
Yeah. So
yeah, I'm story first. So that's my angle on character death. Keep them in the story if it's at all reasonably possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I've kind of come that way as well. I'll try to give them maybe a hero moment or something instead of like a meaningless death or something, right? Like try to give them a hero moment or let them have a monologue or something like that.
Yeah.
And just be like, oh, okay, well, everybody's kind of like on edge because, so-and-so died. Well, let's, take 5 minutes and think about cool last words, and we're just going to make this really super cool or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. But I really like the idea of the cost, like of having them scarred, even emotionally or physically. I really like that.
Right. Yeah. It keeps the plot moving forward. Everybody wants to see the ending. I want to see what they're going to do, at the final climax and stuff like that. And, maybe they kind of should have to pay some prices along the way so that they're not just breezing through everything. But let them get there battered and bruised, but there to see the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, as we know from real life, heroes are rarely untroubled by the end of their heroic exploits. Yeah,
man, I had somebody who was playing an assassin, and they killed somebody, and we were using some trauma rules because it was a system with horrors from beyond the stars kind of stuff, mythos-esque. Sure. And okay, killing somebody is traumatic. He just killed this guy in cold blood. And he said, but I'm an assassin. And I can look at him and I'm like, assassins are not healthy people. That is not a mentally healthy profession. So yes, it is traumatic. Sure, maybe you're going to lose all your trauma points and you'll just be dead inside, like an assassin should be.
Yes. And if old like 70s movies or anything haven't taught us anything, that the hitman is sitting at the bar like drunk out of his mind and in a terrible suit and has nothing to live for anymore, right? Like, because that's where they end up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you know what? Sure, let my characters get to the end of the story, but maybe they're going to have to get some cool scars along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Aron, I've had you on the line. This is awesome stuff. I could probably now launch into like 9 other conversations about cool game mastering stuff. But where can people find your book and learn more about some of your other work, if that's possible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. llstories.com. That's llstories.com. And our guide, the RP guide, our blog, the RP Guide, where we sort of continually write articles about the mistakes we make and the things that we learn about running games. All of our books are there, and the novels that I've written with my wife are up there too. So yeah, kind of everything together.
Well, that's awesome. And I will put links to those into the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. So anybody who is listening right now can head over there, find the show notes for this episode, and you will find links to check out Aron's work. And as you mentioned, novels, I'll just have to have you back on the show sometime and we'll talk about novels, because I released my first novel in June of 2021. So
congratulations.
Thank you.
How hard that is.
Yeah, it's not easy. So I applaud anybody's effort in that. But anyway, Aron, thank you for joining the show today. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, there you have it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Aron today. We really dove in and talked a ton about game master storytelling and how you can improve your game. So I hope you learned a lot. As I mentioned in the episode, I have provided links in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com, so you can check out Aron's book and some of his other works that he has been delving into and producing. Definitely worth your time. Please check those out again in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. Okay, guys, if you want some free stuff, you can head over to dicegeeks.com/free. You get 10 free dungeon maps. You never miss an episode of this show. And each and every Friday, you'll get an email update from me letting you know what is going on in this wild world I call Dice Geeks. All right, guys. It is always, I went a little crazy there, I know. It is always, though, a privilege to come to you each and every Wednesday with another incredible interview. I really hope you enjoy these episodes because I love making them. And I just want to help out you guys, and I want to help out the hobby as much as I can. So, again, thank you so much for listening, and until next Wednesday, keep gaming!